Previously on, she saved a dying wolf. When Maya Karen saved a dying wolf in a storm-soaked forest, she had no idea she'd just healed the most powerful alpha king in existence, or that he'd been searching for her for over a decade. Kale Blackthorn claimed her as his mate, but his love was a lie, a manipulation designed to cage her silver flame power and turn her into an obedient weapon. But Maya discovered his betrayal, shattered his manipulative bond, and when the Devourer of Lights, an ancient entity that feeds on isolation, threatened to consume all of reality, she made an impossible choice: save the world that had rejected her, or watch it burn. 20 wolves. Complete vulnerability. One unified consciousness strong enough to rebuild the seals, but it required an anchor, someone willing to exist in the void forever, holding the prison together from the inside. Kale sacrificed himself to prove he'd finally learned what love really meant. The Devourer was caged. The world was saved. But salvation came with a price no one had anticipated. If you're new here and haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and watch it now. This story will hit differently when you know everything Maya and Kale went through to get to this moment. And if you're returning, welcome back. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, because what happens next is going to change everything you thought you knew about sacrifice and love. Now, let's see what Maya does when she discovers the terrible truth about Kale's eternal sacrifice. The moment hung suspended between heartbeats, between existence and oblivion, between revenge and redemption. Maya stood at the crossroads of everything, silver flame dancing around her fingers like living starlight, while Kale knelt before her with his head bowed and the weight of kingdoms crumbling in his eyes. Behind them, through the dimensional windows of the between space, reality itself was tearing apart at the seams. Another seal cracked with the sound of worlds ending. The Devourer of Lights stirred in its ancient prison, and Maya felt its attention turn toward the mortal realm like a predator catching the scent of wounded prey. It was hunger given form, emptiness made manifest, the thing that had existed before creation and wanted nothing more than to drag everything back into the void where it was born. And she was the only thing standing between it and total annihilation. "Let them burn," the wounded part of her whispered. "Let them reap what they've sowed. 3 years of exile, a lifetime of rejection, and now they come crawling back only when they need you. Where were they when you needed them?" The thought tasted like ash and old pain, like every moment she'd spent alone and afraid, believing herself cursed and dangerous and unworthy of love. But then Maya looked through the dimensional windows at the world she'd left behind, and she didn't see the councils that had condemned her or the packs that had hunted her. She saw children playing in courtyards who would never grow up if the Devourer broke free. She saw young healers learning their craft, old wolves telling stories by firelight, mates finding each other under moonlight. She saw life, messy, complicated, beautiful life, that deserved a chance to continue even if the people living it had made terrible mistakes. "Get up," Maya said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Kale's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in his golden eyes. "I said, get up," Maya repeated, her tone hard as diamond. "I'm not interested in your groveling, Alpha King. I'm not interested in your apologies or your regrets, or your pretty words about how sorry you are." Kale rose slowly to his feet, and Maya saw him brace himself for rejection, for her to turn her back on him and everything he represented. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. "You tried to cage me," she said, silver flame flickering between them. "You tried to steal my autonomy, turn me into nothing more than an obedient weapon. You planned to burn away everything that made me until only power remained." "I know." Kale's voice was raw. "Maya, I'm not finished." The flame around her hand pulsed brighter. "You were a coward who chose control over trust, manipulation over love. You saw something precious, and your first instinct was to own it, to possess it, to break it down into something manageable." Each word hit Kale like a physical blow, and Maya watched something die in his eyes, the last shred of hope that she might forgive him, might see past his betrayal to the man he claimed he wanted to be. Good. Let him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. But Maya continued, and the single word made Kale's breath catch. I'm not making this choice for you. I'm making it for every innocent person who will die, if I let my wounded pride matter more than their lives." She pulled her hand back, and the silver flame between them exploded outward, forming intricate patterns in the air, symbols of binding, of oath, of unbreakable covenant. "So here's how this works," Maya said, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself listen. "I'm going to save your world. I'm going to stand between the devourer and everything you love. I'm going to be the guardian the prophecy says I am." Relief flooded Kale's features, but Maya wasn't done. "But not as your weapon. Not as your tool. Not as your mate." She spoke the last word like a curse, and watched Kale flinch. "I'm doing this as Maya Karen, free, unbound, and answering to no one but myself." The silver symbols hanging in the air began to glow brighter, and Maya felt ancient magic responding to her will. "The mate bond you tried to forge through manipulation? Consider it severed." She made a sharp gesture, and Kale gasped as phantom chains around his consciousness shattered. "Whatever psychic influence you wormed into my mind, gone." Kale staggered as the connections he'd been building snapped like overstretched threads. Without the artificial bond feeding him her power, he suddenly looked diminished, more human, more vulnerable. "You want to stand beside me when the devourer comes?" Maya asked. "You want to prove you're more than the manipulative bastard who tried to enslave me? Fine. But you do it on my terms. You follow my lead. You trust my judgment. And if you ever try to control me again, I will walk away and let reality burn just to watch you lose everything." The threat hung between them, absolute and uncompromising. "Do you understand me?" Maya demanded. "Yes." Kale's voice was barely a whisper. "Maya, I swear." "Don't." Maya held up a hand. "Don't swear anything. Don't make promises you might not keep. Just show me through your actions, whether you're actually capable of change, or if you're just another wolf who sees me as a prize to be won instead of a person to be respected." Through the dimensional windows, the mortal realm shuddered, as shadow walkers poured through widening cracks in reality. Cities burned, packs scattered. The end was coming faster than anyone had predicted. Maya closed her eyes and felt the silver flame inside her expand, felt it reaching toward the heart of the devourer's prison, mapping the battlefield where the final confrontation would take place. "The last seal will break in less than 6 hours," she said, opening her eyes. "When it does, the devourer will be free to consume everything. Every world, every dimension, every possibility that ever was or could be." "How do we stop it?" Kale asked. Maya smiled, and there was nothing warm or comforting in the expression. "We don't stop it. We can't. The devourer is entropy made conscious, the end of all things given form and hunger. You can't kill what was never truly alive." "Then what?" "We contain it," Maya interrupted. "We rebuild the seals. We cage it again the way the first ones did millennia ago." She turned to face him fully. "But the original seals were built with the sacrifice of 7 silver flame healers, 13 direwolves, all of whom gave their lives to create a prison strong enough to hold the void." The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. "You're saying we have to die," Kale said flatly. "I'm saying someone has to die," Maya corrected, "or find another way to generate enough power to rebuild seals that took 20 lives to create the first time." She began walking toward the edge of the between space, where reality grew thin enough to cross back into the mortal realm. "So here's what's gonna happen. We're going back. We're gathering every wolf who's willing to fight, and we're going to find a way to cage the end of the world without me having to sacrifice myself for people who tried to destroy me." She paused at the threshold, and looked back at Kale. "And if we can't find another way? If it comes down to my life? Or the world?" Maya's smile turned sharp as broken glass. "Well, I guess we'll see how much they really deserve to be saved." With that, she stepped through the barrier and back into reality, leaving Kale to follow in her wake and wonder whether the woman he'd betrayed was going to be their salvation or their judge. In the darkness beyond the crumbling seals, the devourer laughed, a sound like stars dying and hope turning to ash, and began counting down the final hours until it would be free to feast. Chapter 2. Unlikely Alliance. Maya stepped back into reality, and immediately knew something was wrong. The air tasted like copper and smoke. The sky above Kyle's territory burned an unnatural shade of crimson, shot through with streaks of black that moved against the wind. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, the screams of the dying echoed through the morning light. Gods. Kale breathed beside her, his face going pale as he took in the devastation. His castle, the magnificent stronghold that had stood for centuries, was half consumed by shadow. The eastern wall had simply ceased to exist, as if something had taken a bite out of reality itself. Wolves scattered across the courtyard below, some fighting shadow walkers, others fleeing toward the forest in blind panic. And standing in the center of the chaos, surrounded by his warriors, and facing down a horde of shadow creatures, with nothing but silver-blessed weapons, in desperate courage, was the last person Maya expected to see. Alpha Silvermoon. "We need to move," Maya said, already channeling silver flame into her hands. She didn't wait for Kale's response. She simply launched herself off the mountainside they'd materialized on, silver flame forming wings that carried her down toward the battlefield like a falling star. The first shadow walker never saw her coming. Maya's flame consumed it mid-lunge, reducing it to nothing but dissipating darkness and a sound like screaming wind. The second and third fell just as quickly, her power flowing through her, with a control she'd never had before. Breaking Kale's manipulative bond hadn't just freed her mind, it had unleashed something she'd been unconsciously holding back. Now, without his psychic influence muddying her connection to the silver flame, she felt unstoppable. "The silver flame!" someone shouted from the Silvermoon ranks. "She's here!" Maya landed in the courtyard with enough force to crack the stone beneath her feet, silver flame radiating from her body in waves that made the shadow walkers recoil. Around her, both Kale's wolves and Silvermoon's warriors stopped fighting to stare at the woman who looked less human and more like a goddess of war descended from ancient myths. "Everyone behind me," Maya commanded, her voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural clarity. Now, to her surprise, they obeyed. Warriors who had been enemies moments ago scrambled to get behind the barrier of silver flame she was projecting, forming a protective circle that the shadow walkers couldn't penetrate. Kale landed beside her a moment later, his direwolf form massive and imposing, but even he looked diminished next to the raw power Maya was wielding. "Maya Karen," Alpha Silvermoon's voice cut through the chaos, and Maya turned to face the man who'd exiled her 3 years ago. He looked older than she remembered, gray streaking through his hair, new lines carved around his eyes by grief and war. "You dare show your face here, after everything?" "Shut up," Maya said flatly, and the Alpha's mouth snapped closed in shock. "I don't have time for your righteous indignation. The last seal breaks in less than 6 hours, and when it does, the Devourer of Lights will consume every world that has ever existed, including this one." "The Devourer is a myth," one of Silvermoon's advisors protested. "A story to frighten children." Maya flicked her wrist, and a dimensional window opened above them, showing the space between worlds where she'd just been standing. Through it, they could all see the writhing darkness, the vast hunger that pressed against reality's weakening barriers. "Does that look like a myth to you?" she asked. The courtyard fell silent, except for the sounds of shadow walkers throwing themselves against her barrier. "What do you want from us?" Alpha Silvermoon asked finally, his voice heavy with the realization that everything he'd believed about the world was wrong. "I want every wolf who can fight," Maya replied. "Every warrior, every alpha, every wolf with enough courage to stand against the end of everything. I want them gathered here within the hour." "That's impossible," Counselor Thorn, who Maya now recognized from Kale's conversation in the cave, stepped forward. "Half the packs are in active rebellion. They blame you for the Shadow Walkers, blame the prophecy." "I don't care what they blame," Maya interrupted. "Tell them they can hate me, fear me, curse my name for all eternity, but they need to be here if they want to survive past sunset." She let the dimensional window close and turned her attention back to the Shadow Walkers. With a gesture, she sent a wave of silver flame through them that cleared half the courtyard in seconds. "You're stronger," Kale observed quietly, Since you broke the bond. I'm unfiltered. Maya corrected. You were siphoning my power without even realizing it. Using our connection to feed your own strength. Now there's nothing between me and the source. She could see him flinch at the reminder of his betrayal. But she didn't soften the blow. He needed to understand exactly what he'd been doing to her, even if he hadn't fully grasped the extent of it himself. Maya, Alpha Silvermoon's voice had lost its authoritative edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. If what you're saying is true, if the Devourer is real, how do we stop it? Maya turned to face him, this man who'd condemned her, who'd called her cursed and dangerous, who'd sent her into 3 years of exile and loneliness. She saw the weight of leadership in his eyes, the burden of knowing that every decision he made determined whether his people lived or died. She knew that weight. She carried it now too. We rebuild the seals, Maya said, the way the first ones did millennia ago. But the original seals required the sacrifice of 7 silver flame healers and 13 dire wolves, all of whom gave their lives to create a prison strong enough to hold the void. You're saying we need to die, Alpha Silvermoon said, echoing Kale's words from the between space. I'm saying we need to find another way, Maya replied, because I didn't survive 3 years of hell just to throw my life away for people who wanted me dead. But to find that other way, I need information. Ancient texts, old records, anything the first ones might have left behind about alternative methods. The archives of the moon. Elder Marcus, the same advisor who'd spoken her banishment, stepped forward with trembling hands. In the deepest vault of the Silver Moon territory, records that date back to the founding of our kind. Can we reach them before the seal breaks? Maya asked. If we leave now, and don't stop for anything, the elder replied. But Maya, those archives are forbidden, protected by magic that kills anyone with darkness in their heart who tries to access them. Maya almost laughed. Good thing my heart is full of righteous fury, instead of darkness. Then, she turned to address the gathered wolves, both Kale's and Silvermoon's, enemies forced into alliance by the end of the world. Here's what's going to happen, Maya announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. We split into 3 groups. Group 1 stays here, and holds this position against the Shadow Walkers. Group 2 spreads out to every pack in the northern territories, and tells them to send their strongest fighters here. Group 3 comes with me to the Silver Moon archives. And who exactly put you in charge? One of Silver Moon's warriors challenged. Maya let silver flame dance across her fingertips, and smiled without warmth. The universe did when it made me the only silver flame healer left alive. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to face the Devourer without me. No one spoke up. That's what I thought. Maya looked at Kale, who was still in his direwolf form. You're with the defense group. Hold this castle. Don't let anything through. She could see him wanting to protest, wanting to stay by her side, but he simply nodded. Proving himself meant following her lead, even when it killed him to let her walk into danger without him. Alpha Silvermoon, Maya continued. You're coming with me. Elder Marcus too. Anyone else who knows the way to these archives. The Alpha looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. My daughter knows the path better than anyone. She's been studying the old ways. Then bring her. Maya turned toward the castle gates. We leave in 5 minutes. Anyone not ready gets left behind. As the wolves scrambled to organize themselves, Kale shifted back to human form and caught Maya's arm gently. Be careful, he said quietly. The archives aren't just protected by magic. There are things down there. Old things. Maya met his golden eyes and saw genuine concern mixed with guilt and desperate hope. I've faced worse than old things in dark places, Kale. I've faced you. The words hit their mark, and she saw him flinch before she pulled away and headed toward the gates. Behind them, another seal cracked with the sound of reality breaking, and somewhere in the darkness, the Devourer stirred with growing hunger. 5.5 hours until the end of everything. Maya intended to make every second count. Chapter 3. The Devourer Rises. The journey to the Silver Moon archives took them through territory Maya had sworn she'd never see again. Every tree, every stone, every curve in the forest path carried memories that cut like knives, running through these woods as a child, learning to hunt with wolves who'd later turn their backs on her, falling in love with Marcus, under moonlight filtered through these same ancient branches. It's changed, Alpha Silvermoon said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. He walked beside her while his daughter, a young woman named Sarah, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's dark hair, led the way through increasingly dense forest. After Marcus died, after you left, the territory mourned. Don't, Maya said flatly. Don't try to make me feel sympathy for people who chose exile over understanding. I'm not asking for sympathy, the Alpha replied. I'm stating fact. We made a choice born of fear and ignorance. We've been paying for it ever since. Maya didn't respond. She couldn't afford to let old wounds distract her from the mission. 4 hours and 43 minutes until the final seal broke. Every second mattered. Sarah stopped abruptly ahead of them, holding up a hand for silence. We're here, she whispered, but something's wrong. Maya pushed forward and felt her blood run cold. The entrance to the archives should have been hidden behind powerful illusions, protected by magic that had stood for thousands of years. Instead, the concealment spells had been shattered, leaving a gaping wound in the earth that descended into absolute darkness. And from that darkness came whispers that made Maya's skin crawl, voices speaking in the language of entropy, of endings, of the void that existed before creation. Shadow Walkers found it first. Elder Marcus breathed in horror. The Devourer's servants have breached the archives. Maya stepped to the edge of the opening and looked down into darkness that seemed to move, to breathe, to hunger. Silver flame flickered around her hands in response to the supernatural wrongness emanating from below. How far down do the archives go? She asked. 7 levels, Sierra replied, her voice shaking slightly. The deepest chamber holds the first records, the original texts written by the Silver Flame Healers who first sealed the Devourer. And between here and there, protection spells, guardian constructs, and enough magical traps to kill anyone who doesn't have pure intentions. Maya smiled grimly. Then I guess it's a good thing I'm doing this to save the world and not for personal glory. She started down the stone steps that descended into darkness, silver flame growing brighter around her body to light the way. Behind her, she heard Alpha Silvermoon, Sarah, and Elder Marcus following, though their footsteps were hesitant, fearful. The first level of the archives was in ruins. Ancient shelves that should have held texts dating back millennia lay smashed on the floor, their contents scattered like fallen leaves. But it wasn't just physical destruction. Maya could feel the wrongness in the air, like reality itself had been wounded here. Shadow Walkers had definitely been through this place, but they were gone now, deeper, hunting for something specific. They're looking for the sealing ritual, Maya realized aloud. They want to make sure we can't rebuild the prison. Can they destroy knowledge? Elder Marcus asked. The texts are protected by... His words cut off as something moved in the shadows ahead. It wasn't a shadow walker. Those creatures were mindless hunger given form, dangerous but predictable. This was something else entirely, something that radiated intelligence and malice in equal measure. A figure stepped into the light of Maya's silver flame, and she felt her heart stutter in recognition. Hello, Maya, Marcus said, wearing her dead lover's face like a stolen coat. I've been waiting for you. But it wasn't Marcus. Couldn't be Marcus. She'd seen his spirit in the between space, peaceful and at rest. This thing wearing his features had eyes that burned with emptiness, with the infinite hunger of the void. The Devourer, Maya breathed. A fragment of it, the Marcus thing corrected, its voice layered with harmonics that hurt to hear, a piece of consciousness sent ahead to prepare the way, and to greet the Silver Flame Healer, who thinks she can cage eternity. Alpha Silvermoon moved to attack, but Maya threw out a hand to stop him. Don't. Physical weapons won't work on it. This isn't a body. It's a puppet made of stolen memories and shadow. The Devourer laughed with Marcus's voice, and the sound made tears spring to Maya's eyes despite herself. Oh, Maya. It crooned, still carrying guilt for this one's death? Still believing you destroyed him with your cursed gift? Shut up, Maya snarled, silver flame building around her fists. But it's so delicious, the devourer continued, circling them like a shark in dark water. All that self-hatred, all that pain. You've been feeding me for 3 years without even knowing it. Every moment you believed yourself cursed, every tear you shed, every time you pushed away the possibility of connection, you were weakening the seals that kept me imprisoned. Maya felt the truth of its words like acid in her veins. Her suffering, her isolation, her belief that she was fundamentally broken. It had all been fuel for the very thing that now threatened to consume everything. The seals weren't just built with sacrifice, the devourer explained, clearly enjoying itself. They were maintained by hope, by connection, by the belief that life was worth protecting. But you've spent 3 years believing you were better off alone, that everyone you touched turned to ash. It smiled with Marcus's face. You've been my greatest ally, little flame. No, Maya whispered. But even as she spoke, she felt the horrible weight of realization. Every rejection she'd accepted, every time she'd run instead of fighting for connection, every wall she'd built around her heart, they'd all been tiny fractures in reality's armor. And the best part? The devourer leaned closer. The man you're starting to care about. The Alpha King who tried to cage you. He's doing the same thing, pushing away connection, choosing control over vulnerability, feeding the very entropy he claims to fight. Its smile widened. You're both so beautifully broken, so perfectly isolated, so deliciously alone. We're not alone. Sierra spoke up suddenly, stepping forward despite her obvious terror. She has us. She has people willing to follow her, to fight beside her, to stand between her and the dark. The devourer's attention snapped to Sarah, and Maya saw the young woman flinch under that terrible gaze. Ah yes, it said, the daughter of the man who condemned her. Tell me, child, if Maya asked you to sacrifice yourself to rebuild the seals, would you? Would you give your life for the exile your father cast out? Sarah's jaw tightened. Yes. And you believe that would be enough? One brave sacrifice? The devourer laughed. The original seals took 20 lives, 20 wolves willing to die for connection, for community, for love. But your people? It gestured dismissively. They can barely work together when survival is guaranteed. What makes you think they'll lay down their lives for a woman they fear? Because she already chose to save us, Alpha Silvermoon said, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and regret. She could have let us burn, could have watched from the between space as we reaped what we'd sown, but she came back. She chose mercy over vengeance. For now, the devourer replied. But wait until the moment comes. Wait until she has to choose between her own life and a world that rejected her. Then we'll see what the silver flame really chooses. Maya had heard enough. She raised both hands and sent a surge of pure silver flame directly at the Marcus thing. The fire consumed it instantly, reducing the puppet to ash and scattered shadows, but even as it dissolved, the devourer's laughter echoed through the archives. I'll be seeing you soon, little flame. When the final seal breaks and we meet face to face, you'll understand that you've already lost, because to cage me again, you'll have to embrace everything you've been running from: connection, vulnerability, the risk of being hurt again. Its voice faded to nothing, leaving only silence and the lingering chill of entropy. Maya stood there, breathing hard, her silver flame flickering with emotion she couldn't quite name. It was lying, Elder Marcus said firmly, trying to break your resolve. It was telling the truth, Maya interrupted. At least about some things. The seals are maintained by connection, by hope, by the belief that life is worth protecting, and I've spent 3 years believing the opposite. She looked at Alpha Silvermoon. We need those records. Now. Before it sends something worse. They moved deeper into the archives, descending through levels of increasing protection and ancient power. At each level, they found evidence of Shadow Walker passage, destroyed texts, shattered spells, reality itself fraying at the edges. Finally, they reached the 7th level. The chamber was massive, its walls covered in silver script that seemed to write and rewrite itself constantly. At the center stood a crystal pedestal, and on it rested a single book bound in what looked like starlight and shadow woven together. The first record, Sierra breathed in awe. Maya approached the pedestal carefully, half expecting some final trap or guardian, but nothing stopped her as she reached out and lifted the ancient book. The moment her fingers touched the cover, knowledge exploded through her mind like a supernova. Chapter 4. Breaking Bonds. The knowledge hit Maya like a tidal wave, thousands of years of history and magic flooding through her consciousness in the span of a heartbeat. She saw the first ones as they had been, 7 silver flame healers standing in a circle, their combined power blazing bright enough to rival the sun. She saw 13 dire wolves forming an outer ring, their ancient strength creating a framework for the healing magic to anchor itself. And she saw the devourer as it truly was, not a creature or a being, but absence itself, the hungry nothing that existed before the first light sparked in the darkness. The original sealing hadn't been a sacrifice of lives. Maya realized with stunning clarity, it had been a sacrifice of isolation. Each of the 20 wolves who'd created the prison had given up something more precious than their lives. They'd surrendered their walls, their defenses, their carefully constructed barriers against pain. They'd opened themselves completely to each other, creating a web of connection so powerful that even the void couldn't tear through it. 20 souls, perfectly vulnerable, perfectly trusting, perfectly bound together by love and purpose. And they'd survived. All of them. The truth of it made Maya want to laugh and scream at the same time. The devourer had lied through Marcus's stolen face. The sealing didn't require death. It required something infinitely harder. It required 20 wolves to stand together without fear, without doubt, without the protective isolation that had kept Maya alive for 3 years. She gasped and pulled back from the book, her knees buckling. Sarah caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight with surprising strength. "Maya, what did you see?" Alpha Silvermoon demanded. "Everything," Maya whispered. "I saw everything, and I know how to rebuild the seals." She looked up at them with eyes that burned with silver flame. "But you're not going to like it." She stood on shaking legs and turned to face them fully. "The original sealing wasn't a blood sacrifice," Maya explained. "It was a sacrifice of isolation. The first ones created a bond between themselves so complete, so absolute, that it formed a web the devourer couldn't penetrate, pure connection given form and power." "So no one has to die?" Elder Marcus asked, hopefully. "We all have to die," Maya corrected. "In a sense, every wall we've built, every defense mechanism, every bit of protective isolation, it all has to go. We have to open ourselves completely to each other. No secrets, no barriers, no fear of being hurt. 20 wolves becoming one unified consciousness, for the span of time it takes to rebuild the prison." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's..." Sarah started, then stopped, clearly struggling to find words. "That's asking for complete vulnerability, total trust. Which is why the devourer has spent millennia feeding off isolation and fear," Maya said. "Because as long as we're afraid to connect, afraid to be vulnerable, the seals will continue to weaken. Our fear is its food." Alpha Silvermoon's face had gone ashen. "You're saying we need to gather 20 wolves willing to tear down every wall they've ever built? To expose their deepest wounds, their darkest secrets, their most carefully guarded pain?" "I'm saying we need 20 wolves brave enough to choose connection over safety," Maya replied. "And we need them in." She glanced at the knowledge still resonating in her mind. 3 hours and 17 minutes. That's when the final seal breaks. "It's impossible," Elder Marcus said flatly. "Most wolves spend their entire lives building those walls. You can't just ask them to drop everything in a matter of hours." "Then we're all going to die," Maya said simply. "Because that's the choice. Total vulnerability, or total annihilation. There is no middle ground." She walked to the center of the chamber, her mind already working through the logistics. 7 silver flame healers, and 13 dire wolves. The problem was, there was only 1 silver flame healer left in existence. "The ratio doesn't have to be exact," she said, speaking more to herself than to the others. "The first record shows variations in different realities. What matters is balance, healing energy and primal strength, woven together through perfect trust." "Even if we could find 19 other wolves willing to do this," Sarah said carefully, How do we know it will work? How do we know we won't just lose ourselves in the connection? Maya looked at her. This young woman, who'd shown more courage in the past hour than most wolves displayed in a lifetime. We don't, Maya admitted. The first ones emerged from the ceiling changed, bound to each other for the rest of their lives. They could feel each other's emotions, share each other's pain, never truly be alone again. She paused. Some of them called it a blessing, others called it a curse. And you're willing to risk that? Alpha Silvermoon asked. To be forever bound to 19 other souls, including people who've hurt you, rejected you, tried to destroy you? Maya thought about the past 3 years. Thought about the crushing loneliness, the constant fear, the belief that she was fundamentally broken and dangerous. Thought about walls she'd built so high and thick that she could barely remember what connection felt like. Then she thought about the world, messy, complicated, beautiful, and worth saving despite its flaws. Yes, she said simply. I'm willing. The question is whether anyone else is. She turned and headed for the stairs leading back up to the surface. We need to return to Kale's territory, gather whoever's willing, and Alpha Silvermoon. She looked back over her shoulder. You need to decide right now whether you're one of the 20. Because if you can't let go of your guilt about Marcus, if you can't drop the walls that make you Alphas instead of just a man, then you're no use to me. The challenge hung in the air between them. Alpha Silvermoon stared at her for a long moment, and Maya saw decades of leadership, of making impossible choices, of carrying burdens no one else could see. Then he nodded. I'm in. Whatever it takes. Good. Maya started climbing. Elder Marcus? Sarah. You're asking me to open my mind to the woman my father exiled, Sarah said. But there was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. I'm asking you to help save the world, Maya replied. Everything else is secondary. Sarah smiled. Then yes. I'm in. Elder Marcus took longer to answer. Maya could see him wrestling with centuries of tradition, of protocols and proper procedures. Finally, he sighed. The elders are supposed to maintain distance, he said, supposed to stay objective, removed from emotion. But I suspect that's exactly the kind of isolation the devourer feeds on. He straightened his shoulders. Count me in. 3 down. 17 to go. They emerged from the archives to find the world had gotten worse in the hour they'd been underground. The sky had turned completely black, shot through with veins of red that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The air tasted of ash and endings. How long? Sarah whispered. 3 hours, Maya replied. Maybe less. The seals are failing faster than predicted. They ran through the forest, racing against time itself. When they finally burst back onto the grounds of Kull's castle, Maya's heart sank. The courtyard was a war zone. Shadow walkers poured through multiple breaches now, and the wolves defending the position were barely holding the line. She could see Kale in his direwolf form at the center of the fighting, his massive jaws tearing through shadow creatures with brutal efficiency. But they were losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were being pushed back. Maya didn't hesitate. She raised both hands and released a wave of silver flame that swept across the courtyard like a cleansing fire. Shadow walkers disintegrated by the dozens, giving the defending wolves precious moments to catch their breath. Kale's head snapped toward her, and even in wolf form, she could read the relief in his golden eyes. Listen up, Maya's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by silver flame. I know how to stop the devourer. I know how to rebuild the seals. Every wolf in the courtyard turned to stare at her. But it requires something harder than sacrifice, Maya continued. It requires 20 wolves willing to drop every wall, every defense, every bit of isolation that keeps us safe. 20 wolves willing to become completely vulnerable to each other, to share everything, pain, fear, shame, love, hope, without holding anything back. She could see the fear in their eyes, the instinctive recoil from the idea of such total exposure. I need 19 wolves, brave enough to choose connection over safety, Maya said. Brave enough to risk being hurt if it means saving everything. Who's willing to stand with me? The silence stretched out, broken only by the distant howls of shadow walkers and the sound of reality itself beginning to tear. Then Sarah stepped forward. I am. Alpha Silvermoon followed. I am. Elder Marcus joined them. I am. Kale shifted back to human form, his eyes locked on Maya's face. I am, he said quietly. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. Maya felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, but opening, like the first rays of light breaking through storm clouds. That's 4, she said. We need 16 more. And slowly, one by one, wolves began stepping forward. Some she recognized from Kale's pack, others from Silvermoon's territory, a few from smaller packs who'd been drawn by the call to defend against the Shadow Walkers. Each one saying the same words, I am. By the time the volunteers stopped coming forward, Maya counted exactly 20 wolves standing in the courtyard, ready to tear down their walls and face the void together. 20 souls willing to choose vulnerability over safety. 20 wolves ready to become something more than isolated individuals. Maya looked at them. Former enemies, strangers, people who'd hurt her, and people she'd hurt, and felt the first stirrings of something she'd thought was dead forever. Hope. Chapter 5. Alpha Silvermoon's Reckoning. Maya led the 20 volunteers to the sacred grove, where this had all begun, where she'd first healed Kale, where the prophecy had awakened, where Alpha Silvermoon's warriors had tried to execute her just days ago. The altar still stood at the center, its silver symbols pulsing with ancient power, but the grove itself had changed. The trees were dying, their leaves falling like ash. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as if reality itself was losing cohesion. 2 hours and 43 minutes until the final seal broke. Form a circle, Maya instructed, her voice steady, despite the terror coiling in her gut. 7 of you on the inner ring, 13 on the outer. It doesn't matter who goes where. What matters is that you're willing to open completely. The wolves moved into position, and Maya felt the weight of their fear like a physical presence. They knew what was coming, knew that in moments, every secret they'd ever kept, every wound they'd ever hidden, every shameful thought they'd ever had would be laid bare for 19 other souls to witness. It was the ultimate nightmare for creatures who survived by maintaining carefully crafted personas. Before we begin, Maya said, standing at the center of the circle, I need you to understand what's about to happen. When I activate the bonding ritual, your minds will merge. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once. You'll feel everything everyone else is feeling. Know everything everyone else knows. There will be nowhere to hide. Nothing you can hold back. She looked around the circle, meeting each wolf's eyes in turn. Some of you will see things that hurt you. Some of you will have to confront truths you've been running from your entire lives. And all of you will emerge from this changed, bound to these 19 other souls for as long as you live. She paused. If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. No judgment, no shame. But once we begin, there's no going back. No one moved. All right then. Maya raised her hands, and silver flame began to spiral around her body. Let's tear down some walls. The ritual began with a whisper of power that quickly built to a roar. Silver flame poured from Maya's hands into the altar, which blazed to life with ancient magic. The symbols carved into stone flared bright enough to hurt, and tendrils of silver light shot out to connect each wolf in the circle. The moment the connections completed, Maya felt 19 other consciousnesses slam into her own like a tsunami. Pain, terror, guilt, shame, hope, love, fear, rage, grief. The emotions hit from all directions, overwhelming in their intensity. Maya gasped and nearly lost her grip on the ritual, but she forced herself to stay focused, to hold the space while the others learned to navigate the sudden absence of walls. Through the connection, she felt Kale's mind brush against hers, and immediately recoiled from the raw wound she found there. His guilt over betraying her wasn't just surface-level regret. It was a gaping chasm of self-loathing that went deeper than she'd imagined, connected to older wounds about his father, about leadership, about being the dire wolf who had to always be in control or risk becoming a monster. I'm sorry, his thoughts whispered across the bond. I'm so sorry, Maya. I was terrified of losing control. of being vulnerable, so I tried to control you instead. I thought if I could possess your power, I'd never have to face my own fear of becoming like him. The memory surfaced unbidden. Kale as a child, watching his father, the previous direwolf king, lose control during a challenge, and tear apart 3 wolves in a blind rage. The terror on the young prince's face. The vow he'd made that day to never ever lose control, no matter what it cost him. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she understood. Kale hadn't tried to cage her because he was cruel. He'd done it because he was terrified of the chaos that lived inside himself. Controlling her had been a desperate attempt to prove he could control anything, even the wildest power in existence. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. I see you, Maya sent back through the bond. I see all of it, Kale. The fear, and the guilt, and the desperate need to prove you're not your father. And I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But I understand. She felt his relief like a physical wave, but there was no time to process it further, because another consciousness was pushing forward. Alpha Silvermoon, and the memories he carried were like knives made of shame. The night Marcus died, played out in perfect clarity across the bond, but this time Maya saw it from the Alpha's perspective. He'd found his son in that clearing, surrounded by 16 dead wolves, covered in blood and silver-eyed with madness. But what Maya hadn't known, what no one had told her, was that Marcus had still been partially conscious in those final moments, still aware enough to recognize his father. "Kill me," Marcus had begged, his voice raw with horror at what he'd become. "Please, father. I can't stop it. I can't control it. I don't want to hurt anyone else." Alpha Silvermoon had hesitated, weapon raised, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," Marcus had whispered. "Tell Maya this wasn't her fault. Tell her I loved her. Tell her the monster was always in me, waiting. She just gave it form." Those had been his last words before the direwolf madness consumed him completely, forcing his father to pull the trigger. Maya felt the grief hit her like a physical blow. All these years, she'd believed Marcus had been mindless, that he'd died as a beast, with no awareness of what he'd done. But he'd known. He'd been awake and aware and horrified, trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey him anymore. "I never told you, Alpha." Silvermoon's thoughts were heavy with guilt. "I thought it would be kinder to let you believe he'd died quickly, that he wasn't suffering. But the truth is, I couldn't face telling you that my son's last words were asking me to forgive you for something that was never your fault in the first place." The Alpha's walls crumbled completely, and Maya saw everything. How he'd blamed her because blaming himself was too painful. How he'd exiled her to protect his remaining pack members, but also to protect himself from having to face his own failure as a father. How he'd spent 3 years knowing he'd made the wrong choice, but being too proud to admit it. "He wanted me to tell you it wasn't your fault," Alpha Silvermoon repeated, his mental voice breaking. "And instead, I made you carry that guilt for 3 years. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm so deeply sorry." Maya wanted to rage at him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain his silence had caused. But through the bond, she could feel the genuine torment in his soul, the way he'd punished himself every single day since that night. "I forgive you," she sent, and felt his shock ripple through the connection. "Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying this weight, and forgiveness is the only way to put it down." Other wolves in the circle were having their own reckonings. Syrah was confronting her mother's death during childbirth, guilt she'd carried since childhood despite having no control over it. Elder Marcus was facing centuries of choices made from fear rather than wisdom. Kale's warriors were exposing prejudices and failures they'd hidden behind duty and loyalty. And through it all, the bond between the 20 wolves grew stronger, deeper, more unbreakable. Maya felt it happening, the transformation the first ones had undergone. Individual consciousness merging into something larger, while still maintaining the core of who they were. 20 separate threads, weaving together into a tapestry that could hold back the void itself. But there was still one wall that needed to fall. One truth Maya had been holding back, protected behind barriers she'd maintained for so long they felt like part of her identity. Through the bond, she felt Kale recognize what she was doing, and his mental presence wrapped around hers like an embrace. You don't have to, he sent gently. You've given enough. No, Maya interrupted. If I'm asking 19 other wolves to be completely vulnerable, I can't hold anything back either. She took a mental breath and let the wall crumble. The truth poured out into the bond. Maya had known. Some part of her had sensed the direwolf bloodline in Marcus before she healed him. Her silver flame had recognized the sleeping predator in his DNA and had made a choice: awaken it or let him die from the silver poisoning. She'd chosen to save him anyway, knowing the risk, because she'd loved him and couldn't bear to lose him. The guilt she'd carried wasn't just about the 16 wolves who'd died after Marcus's transformation. It was about the fact that she'd gambled with other people's lives and lost. She'd chosen one person she loved over the safety of dozens she didn't know, and the consequences had been catastrophic. I knew, Maya confessed to all of them. Maybe not consciously, maybe not completely, but some part of me knew awakening that bloodline was dangerous, and I did it anyway, because I was selfish and in love, and couldn't imagine a world without him in it. The silence that followed felt like judgment, and Maya braced herself for rejection. Instead, she felt understanding flowing from multiple directions. You were 20 years old, Sarah sent, in love for the first time, facing an impossible choice with seconds to decide. You chose love over safety, another voice added, one of Kale's warriors. That's not weakness. That's the most human thing anyone can do. And you've spent 3 years punishing yourself for it. Kale's presence wrapped tighter around her. 3 years believing you were cursed when really, you were just someone who made a choice in an impossible situation. The acceptance, the lack of judgment, was almost harder to bear than condemnation would have been. Maya felt something inside her that had been frozen for 3 years finally begin to thaw. Through the bond, she felt the exact moment when the 20 individual wolves became something more, when their walls fell completely and their consciousnesses merged into a unified whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. 20 souls, perfectly vulnerable, perfectly trusting, perfectly bound together. And the power it generated was like nothing Maya had ever felt before. Silver flame erupted from the altar, rising into the dying sky like a beacon. The ground beneath them began to stabilize, reality itself responding to the concentrated force of their connection. But in the distance, Maya felt it, the final seal shattering. The devourer was free. Chapter 6. Into the Void. The moment the final seal shattered, reality screamed. Through the bond connecting all 20 souls, Maya felt the devourer's presence explode into existence like antimatter touching matter. The sky above the sacred grove didn't just darken, it ceased to be, replaced by absolute emptiness that was somehow more terrifying than any darkness. And from that emptiness came a voice that was every nightmare ever dreamed, every fear ever felt, every moment of despair ever experienced. Finally, the devourer spoke directly into their merged consciousness. Finally, I am free to reclaim what was always mine. All that exists, returning to the nothing from which it came. Hold the connection, Maya commanded through the bond, feeling several of the wolves faltering under the weight of that terrible presence. Don't let it separate us. Our unity is the only weapon we have. Through their shared vision, Maya could see the devourer manifesting in the physical world. It wasn't taking a single form. It was everywhere and nowhere, a presence that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the gaps where reality grew thin. Shadow walkers poured from it like blood from a wound, thousands of them spreading across the territories in waves of annihilation. We need to go to it, Maya sent through the bond. We can't build the seals from here. We have to enter the void itself. She felt the terror that rippled through their merged consciousness at those words. The void was death, was ending, was everything they'd spent their entire lives running from. Trust me, Maya sent, and felt 19 souls reaching back toward her with acceptance despite their fear. We go together. We face it together, and we come back together. The silver flame around them intensified, and Maya felt the ancient magic of the grove responding to their unified will. The altar beneath them began to glow, symbols rearranging themselves into a pattern Maya recognized from the first record. A gateway, a path into the space between existence and non-existence, where the devourer made its home. Everyone hold on, Maya said aloud, her voice echoing through both the physical world and their shared consciousness. This is going to hurt. She activated the gateway, and the world dissolved around them. The transition was agony, every nerve ending screaming as their physical bodies were temporarily translated into pure consciousness. For an instant that lasted forever, they ceased to exist in any meaningful sense, becoming nothing but 20 points of light suspended in infinite darkness. Then they reformed on the other side, and Maya's breath caught at what she saw. The void between worlds was beautiful in the most terrible way imaginable. It was the space where reality hadn't yet decided what to become, where all possibilities existed in superposition, swirling galaxies of unborn stars, shadows of worlds that had never quite manifested, echoes of lives that could have been but weren't. And at the center of it all, the Devourer waited. It was massive beyond comprehension, a presence that dwarfed galaxies and made infinity seem small. But it was also intimate, personal, knowing. Maya felt it looking at each of them individually, recognizing their fears, their wounds, their secret shames. You brought me a feast. The Devourer's voice was almost gentle now. Amused. 20 souls. All their walls torn down, all their pain exposed. Do you have any idea how delicious vulnerability tastes? We didn't come here to be consumed, Maya said, her voice steady despite the terror trying to claw its way up her throat. We came here to rebuild your prison. The Devourer laughed, and the sound was the universe ending and beginning again in the same instant. With what? Your precious connection? Your unity? It shifted, and suddenly Maya was looking at herself. A mirror image formed from shadow and hunger. I am connection's opposite, little flame. I am the space between souls where loneliness lives. Every moment you've ever felt alone. Every time you've believed yourself unlovable. That was me feeding on the gaps in your heart. The shadow Maya smiled with her own face. And you brought me 19 more hearts, all full of gaps I can exploit. Through the bond, Maya felt the Devourer's attention turn to Kale, and shadow tentacles reached out to wrap around his consciousness. The king who controls because he's terrified of chaos. Let me show you what happens when you finally lose control. No. Maya thrust silver flame between Kale and the Devourer's attack, severing the connection before it could complete. You don't get to touch him. You don't get to touch any of them. Protective. How touching. The Devourer's attention shifted to Alpha Silver Moon and the father who killed his son. Tell me, Alpha, do you hear Marcus screaming when you sleep? Do you see his face when you close your eyes? Every night, Alpha Silver Moon's voice came through the bond, strong despite the pain Maya felt radiating from him. Every single night. But Maya helped me understand something. Carrying that guilt doesn't honor Marcus's memory. Living, fighting, choosing connection over isolation. That's what he would have wanted. The Devourer recoiled slightly, as if the acceptance had burned it. Interesting, it said. Genuine curiosity in its terrible voice. You've learned to metabolize pain into purpose. Impressive, for creatures so fragile. It turned its full attention to Maya, and she felt the weight of infinity